Maple Creek Estates was supposed to be our forever home. Perfect rows of colonial-style houses with matching mailboxes and precisely trimmed hedges lined the winding streets. American flags flew from several porches, which had initially given me comfort when we purchased our modest two-story home 3 years ago. My husband Michael and I had dreamed of putting down roots somewhere quiet and stable, a place where he could decompress between deployments and where I could build a community while he was away serving our country. The HOA rules seemed reasonable at first glance. Keep your lawn maintained, no parking on the street overnight. Holiday decorations must be removed within 1 week after the holiday. Standard procedures that kept property values high and the neighborhood looking pristine. What I had not realized was how these seemingly innocent guidelines could become weapons in the wrong hands. Victoria Mercer had been elected HOA president 6 months after we moved in. A former corporate attorney with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and a perpetual expression of mild disapproval, she carried her clipboard through the neighborhood like a military officer conducting inspections. Her two closest allies on the 7-member board, Trevor Wilson and Diane Hoffman, followed her lead without question. Trevor, a retired accountant, handled the financial enforcement, calculating fines down to the penny. Diane, a real estate agent, was obsessed with aesthetic compliance and property values. The first violation notice arrived 3 weeks after Michael deployed for his 4th tour. Lawn exceeds maximum allowable height of 3.5 inches. Fine, $75. I measured my grass. It was barely 4 inches in one small section near the garden. I paid the fine and scheduled more frequent lawn service visits. The second notice came 2 weeks later. Unauthorized wind chime on front porch. $150 fine. The wind chime had been a gift from Michael, a small remembrance of him while he was away. I called the HOA office to discuss these violations, but my messages went unreturned. My emails received only automated responses. Your concern has been noted and will be addressed within 5-7 business days. The promised response never came. Other neighbors seemed to avoid eye contact when Victoria and her board members were present, hurrying into their homes when the clipboard-wielding trio made their rounds. Standing at my kitchen window one afternoon, I noticed Victoria across the street, taking photographs of my mailbox while speaking intensely on her phone. The mailbox was regulation size and color. I had checked the bylaws carefully, yet something about the way she gestured toward my house sent a chill down my spine. That evening, another violation notice was slipped into my mailbox. Improper mailbox maintenance, $100 fine. The notice included a close-up photo of a barely visible scratch on the back of the mailbox, visible only from the woods behind our home. Michael called that night from an undisclosed location halfway around the world. His voice sounded tired but determined as always. "How are things at home?" he asked. I hesitated, not wanting to add to his worries while he was in a combat zone. "Everything is fine," I lied, hiding the growing stack of violation notices in the kitchen drawer. "Just missing you." I did not know then that my attempt to handle things alone would eventually lead us into a battle neither Victoria nor her HOA cronies were prepared to fight. The violations accelerated over the next 2 months. Each week brought new notices, each more absurd than the last. Holiday wreath displayed outside seasonal period, $200 fine. The wreath in question was not holiday-themed, but a simple arrangement of dried lavender. Unauthorized garden stake placement, $150 fine. My vegetable garden stakes were apparently 2 inches taller than regulation. Non-approved window treatment visible from street, $250 fine. The curtains in our front room had been there since we moved in, but suddenly they violated some obscure bylaw. My mailbox became a source of daily anxiety. Each time I approached it, my stomach tightened, wondering what new violation awaited inside. The envelopes were always the same, crisp white with the Maple Creek Estates logo emblazoned in the corner. The fines now totaled over $2,000, and my attempts to appeal went nowhere. I submitted the formal appeal paperwork as outlined in the HOA handbook, but received only a form letter. Appeal denied. Payment due within 10 business days to avoid additional penalties. The quarterly HOA meeting was held in the community center, a building that resembled a small church with its white clapboard exterior and neat shutters. I arrived early, clutching a folder of violation notices and prepared to finally address the board face to face. The room filled quickly with residents whose expressions ranged from resigned to fearful. Victoria sat at the center of the long table at the front, flanked by Trevor and Diane. 4 other board members, all apparently hand-picked by Victoria, completed the panel. Community concerns will be addressed after the budget report, Victoria announced, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The budget report dragged on for 45 minutes, filled with financial terminology that seemed deliberately confusing. When I finally approached the microphone during the community concerns portion, Victoria glanced at her watch. "Please keep your comments to under 2 minutes. We have many items to address tonight." The dismissal in her tone was unmistakable. "I would like to discuss the excessive and seemingly targeted violations being issued to my property," I stated, my voice steadier than I felt. "In the past 2 months alone, I have received 17 violations, many for issues that do not appear to violate any published bylaws." Victoria barely looked up from her papers. "All violations are documented with photographic evidence and specific bylaw references. If you feel they have been issued in error, please follow the appeals process outlined in Section 8.3 of your homeowner's agreement." "I have followed the appeals process 3 times, and all appeals were denied without explanation," I responded, feeling my face grow warm. "Your time is up," Victoria interrupted, gesturing to the next resident in line. As I returned to my seat, a woman with silver-streaked hair leaned toward me. "They are targeting you," she whispered. "They do this to people they want out, military families especially." Her name was Eleanor Jenkins, and she lived 4 houses down. Her husband had served in the Navy for 30 years before passing away last year. "Victoria hates that we get special understanding for deployments. She tried to find me for my flagpole the day after my husband's funeral." After the meeting, Eleanor introduced me to others who had faced similar treatment. The Thompsons, whose son was deployed with the Marines, Mrs. Abernathy, an elderly widow whose late husband had been Army, and the Wilkinsons, who had a daughter currently serving in the Air Force. A pattern emerged from their stories: systematic harassment of military families through selective enforcement of rules, denied appeals, and escalating fines. "But why?" I asked, struggling to understand the motivation behind such targeted hostility. "Victoria's ex-husband left her for a military nurse he met during his reserve training," Eleanor explained quietly. "She has had it out for military families ever since she took over the board. The others just follow her lead, Trevor for the money from fines, Diane because she thinks military families lower property values with their frequent moves." That night, unable to sleep, I peeked through my blinds to see flashlights moving along my property line. 3 figures, unmistakably Victoria, Trevor, and someone I did not recognize, were measuring and pointing at various spots around my yard. They spoke in hushed tones, but their body language conveyed purpose and determination. Whatever they were planning, it was clearly more serious than another petty fine for grass height or curtain color. A sense of foreboding settled over me as I watched them move methodically around my property, their flashlight beams slicing through the darkness like predators stalking prey. The violent pounding jolted me from deep sleep. For a moment I thought it was part of my dream, perhaps thunder or distant artillery, a sound that often haunted Michael's sleep after deployments. But the pounding continued, insistent and aggressive. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed an eerie 3:17 a.m. My heart hammered in my chest as I fumbled for my robe and moved cautiously toward the front door. Through the peephole, the distorted fisheye view revealed a nightmare. Victoria Mercer standing front and center, her blonde hair pulled back severely, face set in grim determination. Flanking her were Trevor Wilson and Diane Hoffman, both looking uncomfortably eager. Behind them stood 3 men in black uniforms with security emblazoned across their chests. One held a clipboard, another had his hand resting near what appeared to be a taser on his belt. I opened the door just enough to speak through the gap, keeping the security chain latched. The cold night air rushed in, raising goosebumps on my skin. "What is going on? Do you know what time it is?" Victoria thrust a folder toward the gap in the door. "Sarah Mitchell, pursuant to Maple Creek Estates HOA Bylaw Enforcement Code Section 12.4, You are hereby notified of immediate eviction due to multiple uncorrected violations and non-payment of associated fines." Her voice carried the rehearsed precision of someone who had practiced this speech. "That is ridiculous. You cannot evict someone at 3 in the morning. Only a court can issue an eviction order," I responded, my mind racing to remember I had read about tenant rights. Victoria nodded to one of the security guards, a tall man with a shaved head who stepped forward. "Ma'am, we have authorization to enter the premises and begin the eviction process. Please step aside." "I am not opening this door without seeing a court order signed by a judge," I stated firmly, reaching for my phone on the entryway table. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. The security guard rammed his shoulder against the door, snapping the security chain from its housing. The door flew open, knocking me backward onto the hardwood floor. Pain shot through my elbow where it struck the ground. Victoria and her entourage entered my home without invitation or legal authority. "The HOA agreement you signed gives us right of access for bylaw enforcement," Victoria stated coldly, watching as I struggled to my feet. "These officers will escort you while you gather essential belongings. You have 1 hour. The property will be secured until formal removal of all possessions can be arranged." Trevor stepped forward, reading from a tablet. "Cumulative fines now total $7,680, including late fees and administrative costs. Non-payment constitutes grounds for expedited removal under Section 12(4)(b) of the Extended Homeowners Agreement." My hands shook with a mixture of fear and rage as I reached again for my phone. "I am calling the police. This is breaking and entering. This is illegal." One of the security guards, younger than the others with a nervous expression, moved between me and my phone. "Ma'am, we are authorized security contractors. The police have been notified of this enforcement action." "That is a lie," I shot back, managing to grab my phone despite his attempt to block me. "I know my rights. No legitimate eviction happens in the middle of the night with private security instead of sheriff deputies." Victoria's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing a flash of something ugly beneath. "Your military connection does not exempt you from the rules the rest of us follow, Mrs. Mitchell. Your husband being deployed does not grant you special privileges in this community." The contempt in her voice when she mentioned Michael clarified everything. This was not about grass height or mailbox scratches or unapproved curtains. This was targeted harassment because my husband served our country. My hands still trembling, I started recording video on my phone. "I am documenting this illegal entry and harassment," I announced, panning the camera to capture each of their faces. Victoria flinched slightly at the camera, but quickly regained her composure. The security guards looked uncertain, exchanging glances with each other. "You have 55 minutes remaining," Trevor announced, consulting his watch with exaggerated precision. I retreated to my bedroom, keeping the door open and my phone recording. Once there, I sent the video to my sister and then called Michael using our secure messaging app. The call connected after several agonizing rings. "Sarah, what is wrong? It is the middle of the night there." Michael's voice was instantly alert despite the poor connection. "The HOA is here with private security trying to evict me," I whispered urgently. "They broke in 3 in the morning, no court order." Michael was silent for a moment, and I could almost see him shifting into the focused, strategic mindset that made him such an effective soldier. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but held a steely edge I recognized from our worst crises. "Document everything, record every word, every action, do not sign anything. Do not leave willingly, make them physically remove you if they insist. I am making some calls, this ends now." The cold determination in his voice gave me strength. "Text me the names of everyone present, full names if you have them." "Victoria Mercer, Trevor Wilson, Diane Hoffman, and 3 security guards," I whispered. "Good, now listen carefully," Michael continued. "Pack essentials as if you are leaving, but move slowly. Buy time, help is coming." The connection crackled. "I love you, stay strong. These people have no idea what they have just started." As I packed a suitcase with trembling hands, I could hear Victoria in my living room, directing the security guards to photograph every room for documentation purposes. I moved methodically, following Michael's instructions to buy time, all while continuing to record video. My mind raced with questions and fears, but beneath the panic, something else was forming, a cold, determined resolve. These people had invaded my home in the dead of night. They had targeted me because my husband was serving our country, and as Michael had said, they had no idea what they had just started. Dawn broke over the Comfort Inn at the edge of town, painting the generic beige curtains with pale golden light. I sat on the edge of the bed, surrounded by hastily packed belongings, a suitcase of clothes, a bow, X of photo albums, and my laptop. My eyes burned from tears and lack of sleep. After being physically escorted from my own home, I had driven here in a daze, checking in with a credit card and a mumbled explanation about home renovations that the night clerk clearly did not believe. The humiliation of being forced from my home in the middle of the night wore on me like a physical weight. But as the initial shock began to fade, determination took its place. I opened my laptop and began researching tenant rights and HOA regulations with single-minded focus. The screen illuminated my face as I scrolled through legal websites and forums. One passage stood out in bold: evictions require court orders and sheriff deputies, not private security. I highlighted it and continued searching. My phone buzzed with a message from Michael. It contained a list of names and contact information, JAG officers, veteran advocacy groups, and 3 attorneys with notes like "worked with him in Kandahar" or "she handled Johnson's case." Each contact came with brief instructions: who to call first, what to say, what documents to request. Michael's military precision translated perfectly to this new battlefield. "Called in favors," his message read. "These people owe me. Use my name. Everything is in motion. More soon." A second message followed moments later. "Audio recording of your call activated our base legal team. Colonel Davis is personally involved. Hold position." I worked methodically through the list, making calls as the hotel room brightened with morning light. With each conversation, the picture became clearer. What the HOA had done was not just unethical, it was blatantly illegal on multiple fronts. Breaking and entering, illegal eviction, harassment, discrimination against military families, civil rights violations. The list grew with each expert I consulted. By mid-afternoon, my hotel room had transformed into a command center. Printouts of HOA bylaws covered the small desk. My laptop displayed property records for Maple Creek Estates. My phone continuously buzzed with messages and calls from Michael's network of military and legal contacts, all offering assistance and guidance. A video call connected me with Captain Ramirez, a JAG officer with tired eyes and a determined expression. "Mrs. Mitchell, I have reviewed the recording you sent. This is one of the most egregious violations of the Service Members Civil Relief Act I have seen in my 15 years of practice. The act specifically protects military families from exactly this type of harassment during deployment." "But they claim I violated bylaws," I explained. "They have documentation of all these supposed violations." "Selective enforcement of bylaws against protected classes, in this case, military families, constitutes discrimination," Captain Ramirez explained. "We need to establish a pattern. Are there other military families in your community who have experienced similar treatment?" The conversation with Alina Jenkins came rushing back. I immediately reached out to her and the other military families she had introduced me to. Within hours, they began arriving at my hotel room, each carrying their own folders of violation notices, denied appeals, and documentation of harassment. Mrs. Abernathy, her hands shaking slightly with age, spread her violation notices on the bed. "They fined me for my flag being 2 inches larger than regulation, then for the memorial wreath for my herald." Her voice cracked. "When I could not pay, they put a lien on my home." The Thompsons had been cited for excessive patriotic displays after putting up yellow ribbons during their son's deployment. The Wilkinsons had received violations for their daughter's service banner in the window. Each story revealed the same pattern: systematic targeting of military families through selective enforcement and excessive penalties. That evening, my phone rang with a video call from Michael. Despite the poor connection and the distant sounds of a military base in the background, his face appeared clearly on screen. He wore his combat uniform, and behind him I could glimpse other soldiers and what appeared to be legal officers in uniform reviewing documents. "We have everything we need," Michael stated, his voice low and focused. "Colonel Davis has contacted the Department of Defense Military Family Advocacy Program. They are treating this as a priority case of discrimination." His eyes, which I had seen remain steady under the most extreme pressure, held a cold determination I recognized. "Sarah, these people made a critical error. They did not just target you, they targeted a military family during active deployment. The full weight of military legal resources is now focused on Maple Creek Estates HOA. For the first time since the 3M invasion of our home, I felt a glimmer of hope. Michael's expression softened briefly. "How are you holding up?" "I am angry," I admitted, "but I am focused. They picked the wrong family to intimidate." Michael nodded, the ghost of a smile crossing his face. "That is exactly what they did. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we counterattack." 3 black SUVs pulled into Maple Creek Estates just after 9 a.m., moving with purposeful precision down the winding streets. I sat in the passenger seat of the lead vehicle, beside Eliza Harrington, a stern-faced attorney who specialized in housing discrimination. In the vehicles behind us rode 2 more attorneys, representatives from the Military Family Advocacy Program, and 4 of my neighbors from military families who had agreed to provide testimonials about their own experiences with the HOA. As we approached my house, I could see Victoria Mercer standing on her front porch across the street, coffee cup in hand, watching our arrival with narrowed eyes. The security guard they had posted in front of my home straightened his posture, suddenly alert at the convoy of professional-looking vehicles. "Remember," Eliza advised quietly, "do not engage emotionally. Everything we do now is about documentation, evidence collection, and establishing legal position. Let us do the talking." Her calm confidence steadied my nerves as we parked in my driveway. The security guard stepped forward, hand raised. "This property is currently under HOA enforcement action. No entry is permitted without authorization." Eliza stepped out of the SUV, radiating authority in her charcoal suit. "I am Eliza Harrington, representing Mrs. Sarah Mitchell. We have documentation proving this enforcement action is illegal under federal law." She handed him a thick envelope. "This cease and desist letter requires immediate restoration of property access to my client. Please step aside." The guard hesitated, glancing across the street toward Victoria, who was now walking rapidly toward us, phone pressed to her ear. Before she could reach us, 2 more cars pulled into the street, a local news van with the Channel 7 logo emblazoned on its side, and a police cruiser with lights flashing. "We received a call about an illegal eviction and potential breaking and entering," the officer stated as he approached, notepad in hand. His name tag read Officer Ramirez, and I wondered briefly if this was coincidence or part of Michael's network of connections. Victoria arrived, slightly breathless but maintaining her composure. "Officer, this is an internal HOA matter. We have bylaws that permit enforcement actions for repeat violations." Eliza stepped forward, handing the officer a document folder. "Officer Ramirez, I have here documentation proving this enforcement action violated multiple laws, including the Service Members Civil Relief Act, housing discrimination statutes, and proper eviction procedures. Mrs. Mitchell's husband is currently deployed overseas with special forces. This middle-of-the-night eviction with private security instead of court officers constitutes breaking and entering." The news crew had begun setting up their equipment, the reporter watching the exchange with keen interest. Victoria's expression flickered between anger and concern as she noticed the camera pointed in our direction. "We have followed all proper procedures," Victoria insisted, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. "Then you will have no objection to providing copies of the court-ordered eviction notice signed by a judge," Eliza replied smoothly. Victoria's silence was damning. The next hour unfolded with methodical precision. The police officer, after reviewing our documentation, instructed the security guard to vacate the premises. Eliza's team delivered individual cease and desist letters to each HOA board member's home, while I provided a calm, factual interview to the news crew, detailing the 3M invasion and the pattern of harassment against military families. Mrs. Mitchell, how do you respond to the HOA's claims that this was simply enforcement of community standards? The reporter asked, microphone extended toward me. The selective enforcement of arbitrary rules against military families while their spouses serve our country is not about community standards, I responded, keeping my voice steady despite my anger. It is about harassment and discrimination. We have documented evidence showing a pattern of targeting families of deployed service members with excessive fines and enforcement actions not applied to non-military residents. By early afternoon, our command center had relocated from the hotel room to my living room. The attorneys worked at my dining table, preparing legal filings and organizing evidence. Military advocacy representatives interviewed my neighbors in the kitchen, documenting their experiences with the HOA. My phone rang with a secured call from Michael. Status report, he asked, his voice crisp and professional. We have reestablished position, I replied, unconsciously adopting his military terminology. Legal T. Is preparing filings. Media coverage has begun. HOA leadership appears to be in disarray. Good, Phase 2 is in progress, Michael stated. Military Legal Affairs has contacted the State Attorney General's office regarding civil rights violations. JAG officers are filing federal complaints under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. His voice softened slightly. How are you holding up? I am stronger now, I answered truthfully. Having a plan helps. The best defense is a good offense, Michael said, a phrase he had repeated often throughout our marriage. Colonel Davis sends his regards. He said to tell you that messing with one military family means taking on the entire armed forces family. That evening, Eleanor Jenkins hurried across my lawn, clutching what appeared to be a USB drive. You need to see this, she whispered urgently. My grandson installed security cameras on my property after my husband died. They captured something last night. We gathered around my laptop as she inserted the drive. The nighttime footage clearly showed Trevor Wilson and Diane Hoffman removing boxes of documents from the community center, loading them into Trevor's car at 1:38 a.m., less than 2 hours before they arrived at my door with Victoria and the security team. They are destroying evidence, Eliza stated flatly, immediately copying the footage and forwarding it to her team. As night fell, I stood on my front porch, watching as Victoria's silhouette moved behind her closed curtains across the street. The power dynamic had visibly shifted. Where once I had felt hunted and helpless, I now stood firm in my own home, surrounded by a growing network of supporters. Victoria's house, by contrast, had become a fortress, curtains drawn, lights dimmed, a sudden for sale sign appearing in the front yard by evening. The HOA that had wielded such fearsome power just 24 hours earlier now appeared to be fracturing from within. My phone buzzed with text messages from other neighbors, expressing support and sharing their own stories of HOA intimidation. The tide was turning, and Victoria Mercer was about to learn a harsh lesson about targeting the wrong family. The taxi pulled up to my driveway at precisely 800 hours, 5 days after the illegal eviction attempt. I had been notified of Michael's impending arrival just 12 hours earlier through a brief, encrypted message. Coming home, ETA 800, prepare for Phase 3. My heart raced as the cab door opened and Michael stepped out in his full dress uniform, combat decorations gleaming in the morning sunlight. His green beret sat precisely angled on his close-cropped hair. Even after 15 years of marriage, the sight of him still took my breath away, not just his physical presence, but the quiet authority he carried with such natural ease. Our embrace was brief but intense, both of us aware of the neighbors watching from windows and porches. Michael surveyed the street with the practiced eye of someone trained to assess terrain and identify threats. His gaze lingered on Victoria's house across the street, where the FOR sale sign now had a price REDUCED banner hastily attached. Situation report, he requested quietly as we entered our home. Legal proceedings initiated on 3 fronts, I replied, leading him to our dining room where documents were organized in precise stacks. Civil complaint for illegal eviction, federal filing under the Service Members Civil Relief Act, and class action preparation with 7 other military families for discriminatory practices. Michael nodded, reviewing the documents with methodical focus. Victoria Mercer, background. Former corporate attorney, divorced 8 years ago. Ex-husband left her for a military nurse during reserve training, I explained. Elected HOA president 2 years ago, has systematically targeted military families since taking control. Tactical assessment. They are fracturing under pressure. 3 board members have resigned since the news coverage began. Trevor Wilson has listed his house for sale. Diane Hoffman issued a public statement attempting to distance herself from the eviction decision. Michael's expression remained impassive, but I caught the slight nod of approval. He had taught me to think strategically, to analyze situations with clarity rather than emotion. It had initially been his way of helping me manage anxiety when he deployed, but those same skills had served me well in this battle. The doorbell rang at precisely 1,000 hours, right on schedule. Michael answered it, standing at his full height in his dress uniform. The effect on the legal team was immediate, back straightened, voices lowered. Even Eliza Harrington, formidable in her own right, showed visible respect. "Staff Sergeant Mitchell," she greeted him, "your wife has been remarkably effective in your absence." "Sarah has always been the stronger strategist," Michael replied with a small smile in my dire. "CD on, I just provide tactical support." The courtroom hearing was scheduled for 1400 hours at the county courthouse. As we arrived, I noticed a gathering of people outside, veterans in various stages of uniform, military spouses holding handmade signs condemning housing discrimination, and local news crews setting up cameras. "The military community protects its own," Michael explained simply when I asked about the turnout. "Word travels." Inside the courtroom, we took our seats beside our legal team. Across the aisle, Victoria, Trevor, and Diane sat with their attorney, a nervous-looking man who kept shuffling papers and whispering urgently to his clients. Victoria studiously avoided looking in our direction, but I caught Trevor glancing repeatedly at Michael, clearly unsettled by the presence of a decorated green beret. Michael sat perfectly still, back straight, eyes focused forward, the same posture he maintained during mission briefings. He never once looked directly at the HOA board members, yet his presence dominated the room. I had seen this before, the absolute focus and calm certainty that made him so effective in his military role. Victoria might control an HOA board, but Michael had commanded men in combat situations. The difference in their authority was palpable. The judge entered, and proceedings began with clinical efficiency. Our attorney presented the timeline of events, the illegal entry, the violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act, and the pattern of discrimination against military families. The courtroom screens displayed evidence methodically, my video recordings from that night, documentation of selective enforcement, and depositions from other military families describing similar harassment. When the financial records were displayed on screen, audible murmurs spread through the courtroom. Trevor Wilson shifted uncomfortably in his seat as the evidence revealed systematic misappropriation of HOA funds. Violation fees had been directed to administrative accounts that appeared to fund luxury retreats for board members and kickbacks to preferred contractors. "Your Honor," our attorney stated, "this was never simply about enforcing community standards. This was a systematic effort to push out military families through harassment and illegal enforcement, while simultaneously enriching board members through misappropriated funds." The HOA's defense crumbled under examination. Their attorney attempted to argue that the nighttime enforcement was standard emergency procedure, but could produce no bylaw supporting this claim. When questioned about the lack of court-ordered eviction documents, Victoria claimed these were in process, a claim immediately refuted by county records showing no such filings. The most damning moment came when Alina Jenkins' security footage was played, clearly showing Trevor and Diane removing documents from the community center in the middle of the night before my eviction. Their attorney requested a recess, during which urgent whispers could be heard from the HOA's table. When court resumed, something had clearly changed. Victoria sat alone at the defense table, her attorney now standing behind Trevor and Diane, who had physically separated themselves from her. The attorney approached the bench, requesting permission to amend their response. The judge agreed with visible reluctance. "Your Honor, Mr. Wilson and Ms. Hoffman wish to provide testimony regarding the actions of the HOA under Ms. Mercer's direction, in exchange for consideration in the pending charges." Victoria's face drained of color as her former allies turned against her. The precise moment when power structures collapse is rarely dramatic. It often happens in small gestures. The way Trevor refused to meet Victoria's gaze, the way Diane clutched her designer purse like a shield, the way Victoria's shoulders slumped as she realized her authority had evaporated. Michael observed it all with the calm assessment of someone who had seen regimes fall, who understood that power maintained through fear collapses quickly when challenged with sufficient force and precision. He had never raised his voice or made a single threat. He did not need to. His presence, combined with overwhelming legal evidence and the weight of military institutional support, had accomplished what angry confrontations never could. As we left the courtroom after the damning testimony of her former allies, Victoria stood alone by the water fountain. Our eyes met briefly. In that moment, I saw what Michael had known from the beginning. She had never been as powerful as she pretended to be. Real strength, the kind my husband embodied, did not need to announce itself with clipboards and middle-of-the-night intimidation. The judge's gavel struck with crisp finality, the sound echoing through the hushed courtroom. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiffs on all counts," Judge Harriman announced, her voice carrying weight of authority that comes from 20 years on the bench. "The actions of the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association constitute clear violations of the Service Members Civil Relief Act, housing discrimination statutes, and proper eviction procedures." She adjusted her glasses, reviewing her notes before continuing. Damages are awarded as follows: $250,000 in compensatory damages to be paid to the affected military families, $100,000 in punitive damages and all legal fees. She looked directly at Victoria Mercer. Additionally, the court orders the immediate dissolution of the current HOA board, with elections to be supervised by court-appointed observers. The financial penalties were substantial, but it was the personal liability ruling that sent visible shock through the former board members. The court finds that Victoria Mercer, Trevor Wilson, and Diane Hoffman acted with malice and are personally liable for damages not covered by HOA insurance. Victoria sat motionless as the impact of the ruling sank in. Her house was already on the market, but it would not be enough to cover her portion of the damages. Trevor stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Diane dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. The carefully constructed power structure they had built had collapsed completely, bringing their personal finances down with it. Outside the courthouse, Michael stood beside me, his arm providing steady support as reporters thrust microphones forward. The flashes of cameras illuminated his service medals, creating bright points of light against his dark uniform. "Mrs. Mitchell, how do you feel about the verdict?" a reporter called out. I looked at the assembled cameras, aware that my response would set the tone for our community moving forward. "This was never about revenge," I stated firmly. "This was about justice and protecting those who protect us. When military families face discrimination while their loved ones serve overseas, we undermine the very principles they fight to defend." Michael remained silent beside me, his presence speaking volumes. He had not sought the spotlight during any part of this process. Like many who serve, his strength was exercised quietly, precisely, and only when necessary. The following week, a special community meeting was held to elect a new HOA board. The community center was filled beyond capacity, with residents spilling out onto the lawn. The atmosphere had transformed from the tense, fearful gatherings of the past to something hopeful and collaborative. "We nominate Sarah Mitchell for the position of Community Advocacy Director," Eleanor Jenkins announced, her voice strong despite her age. "Someone who will ensure that all residents, especially our military families, are treated with fairness and respect." I had not sought the position, but as the room erupted in applause, I realized that leadership sometimes finds you rather than the other way around. Michael nodded his encouragement from the back row, where he sat with a group of veterans from the neighborhood. I accept, I said simply, with one condition, that we create a new set of bylaws based on community support rather than punishment, that we focus on helping each other maintain our homes rather than finding reasons to issue fines and violations. 6 months later, Maple Creek Estates had transformed. American flags flew freely from porches. Children played on lawns without fear of violation notices for noise or temporary play structures. A new community center program provided lawn care and home maintenance assistance for families during deployments. The violation fee system had been replaced with community improvement funds that residents could access for home repairs. Victoria's house stood empty, a silent reminder of what happens when authority is abused. Trevor had sold his home at a loss and moved to another state. Diane had resigned from her real estate practice after clients began asking uncomfortable questions about her ethics. On a warm Saturday evening, Michael and I sat on our front porch, watching our neighbors gather for the first annual Maple Creek Community Barbecue. The event had been a leaner's idea, a celebration of our community's new beginning. "You know what the first rule of combat is?" Michael asked quietly, watching children run with sparklers across lawns that once had been measured with rulers for violations. "What is that?" I asked, though after 15 years of marriage to a Green Beret, I had heard most of his military wisdom. "Know your enemy," he replied. Victoria never bothered to learn who she was targeting. She saw a military spouse alone and thought she found an easy target. He smiled slightly. She never realized that military families are never truly alone. We are part of something much larger than ourselves. As the sun set over our neighborhood, painting the houses in golden light, I reflected on how much had changed, what had begun. As a nightmare, a 3 a.m. pounding on my door had transformed our community. The HOA that had once ruled through fear now operated through mutual support and respect. The military families that had once been targeted now formed the backbone of community leadership. Justice, like the precision shots Michael had been trained to take, had found its mark, not through vengeance, but through systematic, methodical correction of an imbalanced system. Victoria and her allies had declared a forced eviction at 3 a.m., never knowing they were targeting someone married to a Green Beret sniper who understood better than most that the true measure of power is not in intimidation, but in precise action taken at the right moment for the right reasons.